Well, hello there, Kyla. Welcome to the Meaning Project podcast. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us here today.
Of course, absolutely. It's my pleasure. It's good to see you, Dan.
Yeah, well, so tell us, as the host of the Leadership School podcast and the creator of the Passion Restoration Project, like I'd love to dive into those, but tell us a little bit of like who you are, what you do, what brought you to these two kind of big ideas.
Yeah, so it's great to see you, and thanks for having me on your podcast. This is so fun. I love podcasting. I've learned a lot. So, I'm Kyla Cofer. I am a transformational leadership coach. What that means to me is that I help leaders do their personal work, their personal development work, so that they can lead extraordinarily without burning out. And I kind of came to that through trying to think. Okay, I started out as a life coach a few years ago. I realized I have this gift of really helping people to make change and seeing things that other people don't see. And my superpower is in conversations with people. They tell me things that they are like, why am I telling you this right
Mhm.
now? And I didn't never told anybody that before. And then we can like move past that and they find strength in that conversation.
Mhm.
So I realized that and went into life coaching. And through that process, I have a long experience of working with nonprofits.
Mhm.
So I started to notice this was before pandemic. So I started to notice how quickly people get burnt out in nonprofits because I got burnt out working with a nonprofit as a
Mhm.
volunteer.
Mhm.
And I just thought that this is not okay. This should not be the culture. And so I just got into it more and combined all the things together, all of my background in human services, psychology, life coaching, and realized that I can really make a difference helping people heal from and prevent burnout. So I speak and train mainly on that. But I help leaders. I mean, I'm a leader. I have been leading things since I was 15 years old, and so it was a natural thing for me to coach leaders in personal development. And that turned into the Leadership School podcast,
Mhm.
which is you are a guest on,
Yeah.
and depending on when this gets released, but
Right.
the podcast is we talk about I have guests from around the world who
Mhm.
are extraordinary in their field of leadership. And we just talk about wisdom and advice and their particular topics and methods and just what does it mean to lead, to be an extraordinary leader? And how do we do that and care for ourselves? And so over and over and over, we always say, you cannot lead unless you're doing your personal development work. So that's what
Absolutely.
I'm here for. And
Yeah.
I love helping people with that work. And then you asked about the Passion Restoration Project. I actually am not currently running that program, but
Okay.
like if you want it, it's there and I will run it for you. I've got it available, but it's um a a course, an online
Mhm.
course of working through how to heal from burnout and prevent burnout. What Go ahead, sorry.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that magic word. That's been well, okay. I would say lately, but I mean, in my field, in my area, we talk, our first classes in grad school are how to, it's one course in how to prevent burnout. They don't tell you how, they just say you have to watch for it, right? And so when we talk about burnout, especially in nonprofits, I mean, I've been on many nonprofit boards and have watched employees burn out. I felt myself burn out in that kind of service. Why do you think that is? What is it specific to nonprofits that causes that burnout, and how do you prevent it?
Yeah, so that's a long conversation. Literally, books have been written on it. But it's important to start with the definition of burnout so we know what
Mhm.
we're talking about. The medical definition, and I say medical because it's a medical condition now. It's been classified as a medical condition. It's extreme exhaustion, or I'm sorry, let me back up. The mental, emotional, physical exhaustion from overwork or stress.
Okay,
It's-
hold
yeah.
hold on a second. Medical, like who medical where? What medical book am I finding this in?
Oh, I should tell you that. I
Oh,
should know that. I saw that recently. But
okay.
yeah, I know
But it
that
is
that just
truly
is
a
like,
medical diagnosis.
yes, it is. Yeah, this is a very recent thing that's been considered, but that is the medical definition of it. It's the mental, emotional, physical exhaustion from overwork or stress.
Right,
Yeah.
which makes so much sense. And I know I talk about that a lot on my podcast and with others, this idea that in the past 100 years, of industrial revolution, how everything speeds up, we work too much, we consume too much. And we're feeling, especially post-COVID, we're feeling that pressure. And I love the definition of,
Yeah.
you said what, mental, emotional, physical.
So think
Um,
about all the different parts of who you are,
yeah.
what makes up you, and then think about all those things being completely depleted. And when I say exhausted, like this is not like the end of a long day.
Hmm.
It's the end of a line of long days, and
Right.
your body physically feels it. You might have things like hair loss. I always touch my side because like your side starts, you might get digestive issues.
Hmm. Hmm.
Your physical pain, your body literally will begin shutting down, and your mind as well. You'll be anxious, depressed, tired, moody, angry, all of these things.
So in the world of my clinical work, we see so much anxiety and depression, and maybe this isn't even true anxiety and depression anymore, but just the subject, the symptoms of somebody being burned out and overworked.
It could be. It could
Hmm.
be. That
Hmm.
doesn't just like most conditions, you're not like, let me check Dr. Google and it says I have like this extreme thing. Like those
Yeah.
are some signs, yes, of burnout. But you can't like assume that just because you're anxious, that means you're actually burnt out. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle can't be a square.
Absolutely. And podcast disclaimer, please never check Dr. Google for anything of importance, but go see your physician, therapist, psychologist, whoever. Talk to a professional. WebMD and Dr. Google are not your best professionals. But so how do we prevent this burnout? Do we prevent this mental, emotional, physical exhaustion?
Well, going back to what you asked earlier about why we're seeing this a lot now, I mean, I like to say post COVID, but we're not
Hmm.
really, I don't know whenever you're post a pandemic, but what happened during the pandemic was a lot of resources that were available to us were no longer available. And then you had the added stress of, thinking you might die because of this disease and family members dying and, or be very extremely ill. I remember when my husband had COVID, it took me like months to recover, and I wasn't sick. It was just recovering from the stress of the situation.
Hmm.
And because he got it early on and before we even had testing available. And so how much that damaged our mental state because we
Hmm.
didn't have resources, we didn't have the outlets that we normally have. Everything about our system is disrupted.
Hmm.
That's what was going on. Now you had asked earlier about nonprofits, why this happens in nonprofits. Well, I think that in my observations that we often tell ourselves when we're working for nonprofits that there's a story here that we're part of
Hmm.
and we have to show up or something bad will happen.
Hmm.
A lot of nonprofits exist because they're trying to make a difference in a part of society that struggles. Not all of them exist like that. Not
Sure.
all of them are like that. Like churches are nonprofits and they exist to bring community together for your particular religion. So not necessarily that, but they're often low funded, nonprofits are, and so there's a financial strain which causes stress on anybody.
Hmm. Right.
But there's often low funded, low staff, a lot of work because nonprofits have big dreams and big
Mm.
goals, and nonprofits hire people who have big dreams and big goals. And so you're chasing these giant behemoth projects and it gets overwhelming.
Hmm.
And then we also tell ourselves the story that if we don't, then what? If we don't show
Right.
up,
Right.
if we don't answer our phone at 6 p.m. or 8 p.m., 10 p.m., that something's going to burn down. If
Hmm.
we don't work 70 hours, then the job won't get completed. The project won't get completed. So we just keep pushing ourselves, and your body can't sustain that. It wasn't meant for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, having a worthwhile goal like that, helping other people, being a part of a meaningful nonprofit, right, can bring so much to our lives and help our communities and help those around us. Where does it turn bad, right? Because we talk about it, on the Meaning Project, like finding meaningful goals in life, being a part of a nonprofit, doing good work can really be uplifting. What taints that? Those
Doing good
70
work
hour
is
weeks?
up Doing good work is uplifting. It's finding a balance in that, and I have
Mm,
people who tell me balance doesn't exist, but I really firmly believe that it does. It just depends on what your definition of balance is and what that looks like for you. Balance doesn't mean like you're always doing 50% of one thing and 50% of another thing. Balance means that you're constantly making adjustments, and sometimes you do more of one thing and less of the other, but then you flip that, and your scales are moving. You're not just at a steady pace the whole time. But um oh, I just lost my train of thought.
That's all right. I'm curious. I'll derail you a little bit more because I'm curious. What do you say to those people that say, "Well, balance isn't possible"?
I just say I disagree. I just say
Yeah.
I disagree, and then we can talk more about what that looks like for you. What's not possible about it for you right now?
Hmm.
And because really what's going on is that they are carrying too many things and
Yeah.
trying to do too many things, which is really, really common. I mean, we've got families, we've got work, we've got volunteer things, we've got goals and dreams and ambitions, and someone's got to take out the trash, So there's just a lot, and we don't live in villages anymore. We don't live in our small communities. We don't have like our families in our same homes or next door all contributing to different pieces. And there are some communities that do that, that live in like a what's it called? I just forgot the word. Intentional community. Like
Sure.
intentional communities do exist, but that's not the majority. The
Right.
majority is that we're all very, very independent and we're doing things on our own. And then you've got to do it all. Like you have to do the laundry, the trash, clean the bathrooms, do the dishes, and then you got
Hmm.
to go to work and 40 hours at least, maybe
Right.
more. And then the work isn't going to pay you what you need. And in nonprofits, we see a lot of low pay. And so
Hmm.
when there's low pay, then you're having to get income from other sources, which ends
Hmm.
up being a justice issue. There's so many different things, but when with burning yourself out, finding that balance, it takes effort. It does take effort and paying attention to things, and acknowledgement that we can't do everything and
Hmm.
we weren't meant to,
Hmm.
but there are things that we can do well
Yeah.
and find joy in those things.
And I think that's
Um,
where that idea of balance comes in,
mhm.
prioritizing and balancing and figuring out what we do well, what brings us the most joy, the most meaning that we should be engaging in. And maybe, you know, look, I don't enjoy cleaning the toilet. So maybe, finding somebody else in the house that or in the community, maybe even.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, yes, finding other places to do that, and I love that you mentioned joy, meaning, excuse me, you hear this is
not,
balance,
hey,
right? My
that's
daughter is going
balance.
to interrupt
This
us
is
while
a
we have
beautiful
a
thing. If it's
call.
not, if I love that.
I don't know, you're gonna have to go ask. Oh, it's in the bathroom.
I'm gonna
Okay,
pineapple.
okay, go. Her
That
dad
is a
turned the sprinkler on.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example of that balance, right? Like, and I think that's what the pandemic has taught us. Like, these are very real things. We're working, you're obviously working from home or your children come to your office on a regular basis, but
Yeah, I
like
work from home.
this is what we have to be used to in our time. And that's great balance because here we are after a work day or on the cusp of it, depending on what time zone we're in doing extra to try to help people and build that sense of community. So thank you for that really real moment. That was
Oh,
awesome.
yeah.
All my listeners know I don't edit because I got other stuff to be doing and I'm not shipping it off. So I hope they all enjoyed your daughter popping in there. So
She does have a sweet little voice.
she
Yeah, great.
does.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead. You were about ready to go.
I was gonna say as you're talking about the joy of things, I love just thinking about like what brings me joy in life
Mhm.
because if we're investing in all of our time, and I think this is why you're seeing quiet quitting, you're seeing like the great resignation because people are realizing I want what brings me joy in my life. And
Yeah.
what's beautiful about this is that the more we invest in the things that continually bring us joy, and not doing the things that don't, the more that we are the more that we're allowing other people to do the things that bring them joy and not taking that away from them.
That is such a great point. And we talk
You
about
need
that
to go
quite
now.
a lot. That idea of finding what's most meaningful and going with it and choosing those tasks. Work can still be meaningful and we can still enjoy it, but we do have to find those things that bring us the most joy and hopefully outsource or find a way to tolerate those more difficult things. Or as we talk about in the field of logotherapy, when we suffer through those things, sometimes they help with growth. But when they cause burnout and medical conditions of physical exhaustion, that's not suffering for a higher achievement. That's just suffering for pain.
And there are things in life that you got to do. You've
Right.
got to clean the toilets and do the trash. And like sometimes you just have to do things.
Yeah. Please don't
But
tell my wife that. I would appreciate it. I'm gonna hope she doesn't listen to this part of the episode.
I mean, we there are things in life that are not pleasant and enjoyable.
Hmm.
But I mean, I just had this conversation with my son. We were supposed to go camping this weekend on a camping trip for his Boy Scouts.
Hmm.
And I told him that he had to contribute to by cleaning the car out. And when the car was cleaned, then we could go. If it's not cleaned out, then we can't go on the trip. And he said, well, I don't want to do that. I just want to go on the trip. And I said, well, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. Then we won't go. And he said, but I want to just go on the trip. I want to like not have to do the work and go on the trip. But he literally said that I want to not have to go on the work and do the work and then get to go on the trip. And I just said, well, that's just not how it works. You get to choose. You are choosing. If you're choosing not to do it, you are choosing not to go on the trip. If you
Mhm.
do the work, you are choosing to go on the trip. And we do have that. If we're choosing to continue to engage in things that cause us pain, we are choosing that. We always have choices. And when we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. Those are just
Mhm.
like our boundaries. But yes, sometimes you have to do that work, but do you have to do that work to the expense of your health and your well-being and your
Right.
relationships? No. And if those things are happening, that's when we have to speak up and we have to notice. We have to step back and start noticing, how am I really connecting here in my life with myself and outside of myself? How am I really building my life? And are there things that I'd be willing to change?
Mhm.
And sometimes it's hard because we have to acknowledge that we're doing it to ourselves,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Well,
and
by our choices. Yeah.
we want to always blame it outside of ourselves. We want to say, well, the job and the money or the rent that has to happen. And yeah, sometimes things happen.
Mhm.
Sometimes the world starts spinning with things that we can't control. But we always get to we 100% of the time always get to control how we're going to show up. And that's what your meaning project logotherapy, Viktor Frankl, is all about, is saying 100% of the time we get to show up as
Mhm.
how we want to show up. And that's the choice that we have. We can be in
Mhm.
the worst conditions that are not our fault, but we get to choose. And so that's what creates that joy and that life balance
You
is
have
burnout.
certainly done your homework. That was quite impressive. That's exactly where I was going to go. You're absolutely right. We have the opportunity to choose our attitudes towards all of those difficult situations, and we can either let them hold us down and oppress us and lead to burnout, or we can make different choices. We can choose our attitude. We can learn through those difficult times and grow from it and make them better.
And I want to say that making those choices is not easy.
No.
Especially, as adults. I always say, when I'm teaching my prostitution solicitation school, which is a whole
Mhm.
nother thing, but it's a school for people who have been arrested and they have to go to this day-long program about, the dangers of it. And of people who have solicited, not the prostitutes, people who've solicited. And so they go to this day-long program. And in that program, one of the things I say is, you are an adult. As an adult, you have habits in your life that you have been doing since who knows when. And those habits can be really hard to change. And it's not like you can just wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to be different today, because you're still going to do those same things that you've done every day. So if we're
Right.
wanting, that's the same thing for, if we're burning out and we're exhausting ourselves, you're not
Mhm.
going to just wake up in the morning and go, okay, everything's going to be fine today. Like, you have to be intentional about it. You have to say, well, if everything's going to be different, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to change that? And I've got to do something within myself to really meet that goal. With any goal, weight loss, whatever it is, you have to know that that change has to come from in you, because if it doesn't, that the world just doesn't change. The world stays the same. You're the one who has to make the difference.
Right. And I know lately in the past few years from Dr. Jordan Peterson, but as well as I know there was a military commencement speech that talks about the simple act of making your bed, right? Just doing
Yeah.
those little things to change behavior. One of my favorite examples of that classic 20, 30-year-old movie from Bill Murray, What About Bob? The message of What About Bob is baby, that giant book, right?
Baby steps.
Baby steps. And that's so true. I'm baby stepping out of the office. I'm baby stepping into the other, right? He makes a joke out of it. But those little things that we do to change our trajectory on a daily basis, just getting up and making our bed, organizing our environment, then organizing our home and our community, can lead to massive change.
And all of these things, really, I truly believe it comes down to what we believe about ourselves.
Hmm.
What is it that we're saying about ourselves? The stories we tell ourselves about who we are, about what we're worth, about the confidence levels that we have. Because the more we tell these stories, if we tell these negative stories about ourselves, that like, well, I'm only worth being exhausted all the time. I'm only worth like giving my all to everything and being
Mhm.
bullied. I mean, you and I were talking about a bully story earlier.
Mhm.
And the what is the story that we tell about who we are?
Mhm.
And only when we can begin to change that can we begin to change how we act. And sometimes you have to look at how I want to act and change, you start, I guess sometimes you do have to act first and then you can change the belief, but the
Mhm.
action is more like I'm going to start by telling myself good things about myself. I'm going to start by saying no to things. And that might be really
Mhm.
hard for some people to say, well, no, I'm not going to volunteer this week because I'm tired.
Mhm. Right. Well, and I think that's an important part, right? Not only the negative messages we send ourselves that I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I have to work these hours. The other side of that is, well, if I'm not here working 70 hours a week, nobody's going to do it, and it's just not going to get done. And there's a need to maybe deflate some of those excessive thoughts of, yeah, if it doesn't get done in the 35 to 40 hours you have, maybe it needs to wait till next week, because doubling the amount of work you're putting in a week isn't helping anybody, and you can't be helpful to the organization or the business or to other people if you're falling apart.
That's the key right there. Remember the definition of burnout, the mental, emotional, physical
Hmm.
exhaustion. And if you keep putting yourself in these situations, this is the same with compassion fatigue, also, like when you're
Hmm.
caring for somebody. If you keep putting yourself in this space saying, I'm the only one who can do this, w- who's going to be there when you're so mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted that you can no longer function? Then who's
Hmm.
going to do the job?
Hmm.
You're not going to be there forever. You can't
Hmm.
do that.
Hmm.
And we see this in caregivers. Like I remember my grandfather cared for my grandmother who had Parkinson's and never asked for help, never got any help. And he only lived a year after her death because he had
Mm.
nothing left. And he cared for her 24 hours a day and refused to ask for help. And it takes its toll on your body. You who's going to do that work if you're not there to do it because you've pushed yourself too much? It's okay to ask for help because you would want to help somebody else. Other
Mhm.
people want to help you. Like, let them do it. Let them do it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing two very distinct solutions, right? So when we cover burnout, one of the solutions to burnout is to maybe minimize some of the tasks or choose your task more wisely, to remove some of those tasks from your day or your week, and leave time for more meaningful decisions. Maybe just a rest or a nap every once in a while would be good. But the solution, what I hear you saying, in compassion fatigue, if we're a caregiver, you can't really minimize the amount of care somebody needs. But what I hear you saying is the solution is, well, then ask for help, because there are people out there that want to help.
And I get that sometimes, like, you think finances aren't there or you don't know how you're going to pay for it and afford it.
Mhm.
There's always a way. There,
Mhm.
it's just amazing to me how the universe opens up for something when you need it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That when you are willing to open yourself up to something and to let go of good for something greater, like to open yourself up to admitting that you need that help, but just taking that step out,
Mhm.
all of the excuses that you made start to disappear
Right.
one after the other as you choose yourself over
Mhm.
and over.
Mhm.
It really is almost miraculous. The whole universe wants to contribute to your well-being, to everybody's well-being. The universe only succeeds if people are well and wants
Yeah,
people to
I
grow.
think
It's like a
that's
seed that wants to grow, you know?
yeah, that's an amazing point. And I hear that so often in both my organizational consultation, my clinical practice. Like, when we stop and actually ask for help, when we pause, when we give ourselves space, it's amazing what solutions come up. And Dr. Frankl in logotherapy calls it, the noetic, the spiritual, the universe, fate, whatever you want to call it. It's amazing. Like, things work out for the better when we slow down and give ourselves that time, when we ask for help, when we take the time to prevent burnout. All of a sudden we start seeing better solutions. There's some good neuropsychology in there. When we let the brain slow down, when we stop that constant adrenaline drip, our brains do amazing things while we're sleeping. We're so busy saying, I have to come up with a solution, and our bodies are telling us, will you please slow down so I can take care of this?
And if you don't, your body will make you because you'll get sick.
We talk about, yep, I've been talking about that a lot lately. If you don't slow, I've had it happen to myself and many friends, people I work with. Like, when you don't take that time, sooner or later, your body's going to say, okay, that's fine. You don't want to listen?
Yeah.
I got this.
our minds need time to let our thoughts wander. And I've talked about
Mhm.
this a lot in leadership school, with several of our guests that, it's amazing when you're focused on a project, you spent 12 hours and you haven't taken a break working on this project and going, and you just feel stuck and you don't know what to do, but you've got to get it done. Well, quit, take a break,
Mhm.
walk away, come back to it, and your brain doesn't stop working just because
Mhm.
you did. It's not like you have to be focused on it that whole time, but you might go for a walk on the beach, pick up a shell, and then go, I get it. And you're back
Yep.
to that project and you could go and you're renewed and you're ready to do it, and
Right.
our bodies and our minds need that rest. And
Right, and it's
and
been so we've been told, like, daydreaming is terrible for however many generations of school and elementary school, and, especially, well, me personally as a young man staring out
oh
the
no.
window in 3rd grade, right? Like, and I've talked to many men who remember those early years of, like, you need to stop daydreaming, and I was just reading some research. I love the work of Johann Hari and his latest book, Stolen Focus, summarizes this huge body of research that says daydreaming is necessary. We've been
Oh, good.
squishing it for so long. And right, like a good walk in the woods. I like the idea of walking on the beach. We don't have many here, but I need to find one. Right. Like that's so true. Taking a step back from the task and being in nature, all of a sudden our brain goes, yeah, I got it.
Man, I think I was probably told not to daydream, but I just never listened to that because I didn't care. I was like, I
Too
love being in
busy
my own little
daydreaming.
world. And I
Right,
I
right.
remember my 6th grade teacher getting mad at me, and I was like, whatever.
Mhm.
I don't really care what you think. This is
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Well, and as much as I love listening to podcasts and audiobooks and always having kind of something in my ear, feeling like, oh yeah, I have to be doing this to grow and learn, it's so important sometimes just to have that silence, to have times where whether it's driving in silence or going for a good walk in silence, those times are so, a run, whatever it might be.
Every time we take an early morning road trip, I love like having it's like a requirement. We have to have the first few hours in the car, it's quiet, and it just kills my husband because he loves to listen to music. And I'm like,
Wow.
you want me to be happy on this trip? We're going to be quiet.
Mhm. And I
And
can't
then
remember
we have
where
to
go.
compromise and he gets his music later.
Sooner or later you got to have some tunes, but I've been doing this for the past few years, just turning off the radio on my drive to work and just letting my mind, wander, but prepare myself for the day. And the same thing on the way home. I mean, after a busy day, just having those 20 or 30 minutes to let my brain just kind of slow down, enjoy the scenery, enjoy the fresh air.
And
It's it's
if that
different.
is really hard for you to do for a listener, I want to recommend listening to something that's meant to help your mind wander. Like there are a lot of things on music playlists, like binaural beats or
Hmm.
meditations that will just
Hmm.
be like sounds,
Hmm.
and you'll still feel like you're doing, but it'll
Hmm.
be it's meant to help your mind wander, and that's a really beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I love the binaural beats. Good
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
I want to come back to one of the phrases we talked, one of the terms you talked about at the very start, transformational leadership. I think there's so many possible definitions of that. Tell me, what is your definition of transformational leadership?
Yeah, for me, like I said, it's really about that personal development work. So it's transforming yourself so that you can really transform your leadership. So it's that investing in your skills and in your mindset, your thought processes, the way that you respond to situations, the way you think about yourself, and really changing those internal systems and internal messages. Because in doing that, the leadership goes with it, and you just go miles. It's amazing. The leaders we see who have really excelled, it's because they've done this type of work.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And it's having that person with you, a team member, encourager, a cheerleader, a motivator, a mentor, coach, all of those things, having that person with you who can see things that you're not seeing. It just like, and it's a coach. I'm a coach, so I like to say for sports, if I don't
Mhm.
really play sports, I'm not a sports person. I like talking about stuff like this. But if you're a big sports person, if you want to become the best basketball player in the world, you got to change yourself, and you have to have a coach with you. Like
Mhm.
you're not going to see that you're dribbling weird. You got to have someone who can go, okay, do a little bit different like this way, and
Mhm.
um do this play differently and try these
Mhm.
things. And I guess that's what they say. I don't really know. But that coach helps you to really push you further than you can go yourself. And in
Mhm.
transformational leadership coaching, that's what I'm doing is I'm coming
Mhm.
alongside you and you're going, I really want to get here with my team. I really want to get here in my leadership role. And I can go and say, these are some ways that you can do that. And I am helping ask those questions and give you feedback that you're just not seeing because you're in the middle of it.
Right. I think one of my so two different coaching moments. I coached soccer for my daughters for 10 years, right? And so one of the greatest things to ever experience is teaching a young person rather than, right, how do we naturally just growing up kick a soccer ball? We wind up, point our toe as hard as we can at that in the middle of the ball, and it flies hard and fast and in whatever random direction the point of your toe
Yeah.
is going. And when you teach a young person, look, if you move your foot just a little bit like this and use the inside of your foot, you can direct where that's going. And they go, oh, that's amazing. Like all of a sudden it goes hard and fast and in the direction they thought it was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing for organizational coaching, individual coaching. I love those moments where you just such a small detail, like you said, that somebody isn't able to notice or see within themselves. You say, hey, maybe when you give feedback, rather than standing this way, you stand this way. Rather than looking closed off, you open up. And all of a sudden a week later they say, hey, I tried that. And some really cool things kind of happened. That soccer ball went the direction I thought it was going to go instead of all over the place.
Yeah, and having someone to help reframe the stories that you're telling.
Mhm.
I've mentioned story several times, and because I just have seen in the last 20 years how impactful the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories we listen to and we pay attention to, make such a difference in our lives. And when we have someone that can say, "Well, is that true? What's the story that you're creating here? Let's find a different perspective here. What's a different way of going about it?" It can change everything.
That's awesome. Well, how do people find out more about the amazing transformational leadership work that you do? How do they connect with you and find out more about the Leadership School podcast?
Yeah, well, you can go to leadershipschoolpodcast.com or just
Mm.
look on any podcast platform. It should be on all of them. I think if it's not, let me know and we'll get it there. And you could go to Kyla Cofer. My name is spelled Kyla. My last name is
Mm.
Cofer.com. F as in Frankel, DER.com. And you can just read all about me there. I do speaking, I do keynote speaking,
Mhm.
workshops and trainings on burnout prevention, healing, on personal development, or on embracing failure. I have a lot of
Mm.
trainings on all of those topics. So I'd be happy to bring those to anywhere. But I also, of course, do one-on-one coaching, and you can just reach out to me through my website. And I'd be happy to talk to you about what that looks like to privately coach with me.
That's awesome. I love a good failure story. We might have to have you back on to talk about those. Failure is not something to fear, but something to embrace. We talk about that a lot here.
Oh man, I have those stories.
Excellent. Well, Kyla, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was wonderful. I can't wait to see what the listeners have to say. This is some wonderful information. I hope you've taught a lot of people about preventing burnout and compassion fatigue. Thank you so much.
This was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Take care.